The bottle shattered against the wall. Glass exploded everywhere. Emily Grace hit the floor hard, her cheek already swelling from the blow. She was 22 years old, and in that moment she realized her stepfather was about to sell her like cattle. "Get up," Jack Turner snarled, his breath reeking of whiskey and failure. Outside, 3 debt collectors waited in the scorching sun, their eyes already undressing her through the window. Jack had gambled away everything. The ranch, the money, his dignity. Now he wanted to pay his debts with her body. Emily's hands shook as she pulled herself up. "Please," she whispered, "don't make me do this." Jack's face turned purple with rage. The slap came so fast she didn't see it. Her head snapped sideways. Blood filled her mouth. She stumbled backward, crashing into the table. He grabbed a fistful of her hair and dragged her toward the door. "You'll do what I say, girl. You're nothing but a burden anyway." The men outside laughed as Jack shoved her into the dirt. Emily's dress tore at the shoulder. Dust caked her bleeding lip. She looked up at these strangers, these vultures, and saw no mercy in their eyes. Just hunger, just greed. "No," she said, her voice breaking but defiant. "I won't." That word, that one word of resistance, ignited something demonic in Jack Turner. His pride, already shredded by poverty and addiction, finally snapped. He kicked her in the ribs, once, twice. Emily curled into a ball, gasping for air that wouldn't come. The men cheered him on like it was a show. Jack dragged her by the arm across the yard. Her knees scraped against rocks and thorns. She screamed, but there was no one to hear her, no mother to protect her, no law to intervene, just the endless prairie and the cruel sun beating down on her suffering. They reached the riverbank. The water rushed past, dark and cold and indifferent. Emily's vision blurred with tears and pain. Her dress hung in tatters. Purple bruises bloomed across her arms like poisonous flowers. She tried to crawl away, but Jack's boot came down on her back. "You defy me?" he roared. "You ungrateful little wretch!" In one violent motion, he lifted her off the ground and hurled her into the river like garbage. The water swallowed her whole. Ice-cold shock stole her breath. The current grabbed her immediately, pulling her under, spinning her like a rag doll. Her lungs screamed for air. Her torn dress wrapped around her legs, dragging her deeper. Emily clawed at the water, fighting toward the surface. But the river was stronger. Her strength drained away with every desperate movement. The voices above faded into muffled echoes. Darkness crept in from the edges of her vision. Is this how it ends? Drowned like an unwanted animal because she refused to be destroyed? Her body went limp. The fight left her. She began to sink. Then something grabbed her arm, strong, urgent. A shadow moved through the water above her. Someone had jumped in. Someone was pulling her up, fighting the current, refusing to let her go. Emily broke the surface, coughing and choking. Strong arms carried her to the shore and laid her gently on the grass. She couldn't stop shaking. Her whole body convulsed as river water poured from her mouth. Through blurred vision, she saw a man kneeling beside her, older, weather-worn, with kind eyes full of shock and fury. "What in God's name?" he whispered, staring at her battered face and torn clothes. "What kind of devil does this to a child?" That man was Thomas Carter, a rancher in his late 50s who'd been riding past when he heard the commotion. He looked back toward the shack and saw Jack Turner and his crew watching from a distance, calculating their next move. Thomas knew immediately that pulling this girl from the river was just the beginning. The real fight was about to start. Thomas didn't ask permission. He scooped Emily into his arms, placed her on his horse, and rode hard toward his ranch. She shivered against him, barely conscious, her body broken but somehow still breathing. Inside his modest home, he laid her near the fireplace and wrapped her in every blanket he owned. But she kept shaking, kept shivering, her lips turning blue despite the warmth. Fever was setting in. Thomas grabbed one of his old work shirts from a trunk, clean and worn soft from years of use. "Put this on," he said gently, turning away to give her privacy. "You'll be warmer." The shirt swallowed her small frame, sleeves hanging past her hands, but for the first time in years, Emily felt something she'd almost forgotten: safety. She pulled the fabric close and stared into the fire, tears streaming down her face. Thomas sat beside her, waiting. He didn't push, he just waited. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. It wasn't the first time. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. "He's beaten me for years," Emily continued, her words tumbling out like a confession. "Every day I prayed it would stop. Every night I went to bed wondering if I'd wake up. And today, when those men came for their money, he told me to serve them, to give myself to them like I was some kind of payment." Her hands trembled as she wiped her eyes with the oversized sleeves. "I said no. I fought back. So he beat me worse than ever before and threw me in that river like I was nothing, like my life meant nothing." Thomas reached over and placed his rough, calloused hand on hers. "Your life means everything. You hear me? Everything. What he did to you is evil, pure evil, and you didn't deserve 1 second of it." Emily sobbed, her whole body shaking with the weight of finally being believed, finally being seen. "Sometimes I thought maybe I was cursed. Maybe God had forgotten about me. But when you pulled me out of that water, I wondered if maybe he hadn't." "He didn't forget you," Thomas said firmly, "and I won't let that man hurt you again." But even as he made that promise, they both knew Jack Turner wouldn't give up. Men like him never did. The next morning proved Thomas right. Emily was standing by the window, still wearing his shirt, when she saw the rider approaching. Her blood turned to ice. Jack Turner rode right up to the gate like he owned the place, swagger and arrogance radiating from every movement. "Where is she?" Jack shouted, dismounting with theatrical anger. "Where's my daughter?" Thomas stepped onto the porch, tall and unmoved. "She's not your daughter, and she's not yours anymore." Jack laughed, that hollow sound that men make when they've lost everything and have nothing left but cruelty. "You think you can keep her? She belongs to me. She always will." From inside, Emily's voice rang out stronger than before. "No, not anymore." Thomas crossed his arms. "You best ride out of here before this gets ugly." For a moment, Jack looked ready to charge, but even drunk and desperate, he recognized danger when he saw it. Thomas Carter wasn't some girl he could bully. He spat in the dirt, cursed viciously, and climbed back on his horse. As Jack rode away, Thomas turned to Emily. "He'll be back, and next time he'll bring help." Emily's face went pale. "What do we do?" Thomas thought for a moment. "There's one man who can help us. Sheriff Hawkins." That afternoon, Thomas rode into town and found the sheriff, a weathered man with steel-gray eyes, who'd seen every kind of evil the frontier had to offer. Thomas laid out the whole story, sparing no details, holding nothing back. Sheriff Hawkins listened, his expression growing darker with every word. When Thomas finished, the sheriff nodded slowly. "Bring her under my protection. If Jack Turner shows his face again, he'll answer to the law." Thomas rode back to the ranch with hope flickering in his chest, but he also carried a gnawing certainty that this wasn't over. Men like Jack didn't accept defeat. They plotted, they schemed, they came back with reinforcements, and when they did, there would be blood. Night fell over the ranch like a heavy curtain. Emily sat by the fire, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Thomas paced the floor, rifle within reach, every instinct screaming that danger was coming. Then they heard it, hooves, lots of them. Dogs started barking. Emily's cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor. Thomas grabbed his rifle and stepped onto the porch. A dozen torches lit up the darkness. Jack Turner sat at the front of a mob, grinning like a demon. Beside him was the debt collector, a tall man with a jagged scar across his face. Behind them, armed thugs, hired guns, men who killed for money and asked no questions. "Bring her out, Carter," Jack called at. "Last chance." Thomas planted his feet. "You're not taking her." The scarred man sneered. "Old man, you can't fight us all." They charged. Thomas fired a warning shot that echoed across the valley. It stopped them for one heartbeat, and then they surged forward like a wave. Thomas swung his rifle like a club, knocking one man down. Another came at him with a knife. They crashed together, fists and boots in the dirt, grunting and cursing. Emily screamed from the doorway. Two men grabbed her, started dragging her away. She fought like a wildcat, scratching and biting, but one of them struck her across the face. she fell. Thomas roared and broke free, lunging toward her, but 3 men jumped on his back. He threw punches, twisted and fought, but the weight was too much. They slammed him to the ground. Blood streamed from his forehead. His vision blurred. Jack stood over him, laughing. "You're finished, Carter." "Should have minded your own business." Emily cried out, "Leave him alone." She tried to crawl to Thomas, but rough hands shoved her back into the dirt. Jack raised his boot, ready to stomp Thomas's chest. The scarred collector yanked Emily's hair back, his face inches from hers. "Time to pay what's owed, girl." Everything seemed lost. The torches flickered, the mob closed in. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the end. Then from the darkness came thunder. New voices shouted through the night. "Sheriff Hawkins, drop your weapons now!" Lanterns swung as riders surrounded the yard. The sheriff sat tall on his horse, revolver steady, his deputies fanning out with rifles raised. For the first time that night, Jack's grin disappeared. "I said drop them," the sheriff commanded. One deputy fired a warning shot. Knives clattered to the ground. Guns were tossed aside. Hands went up. The mob that had seemed so powerful seconds ago now looked like cowards. Jack's face twisted with rage and terror. For years he'd ruled with violence and fear. Now he was powerless, exposed, finished. "Take them in," Sheriff Hawkins ordered. Within minutes, Jack and the debt collector were bound in ropes, shoved onto horses, and led away toward town and justice. The torches faded into the distance. Silence returned to the ranch, broken only by heavy breathing and the crackle of the fire. Thomas struggled to his feet, wiping blood from his eyes. Emily ran to him and threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. This time her tears weren't from pain but from release, from the overwhelming relief of finally being free. "It's over," Thomas said, holding her close. "He'll never hurt you again." The sheriff tipped his hat. "You two have been through hell. Rest now. The law will handle the rest." Then he rode off into the night, leaving peace behind. Dawn broke soft and golden the next morning. Emily stood on the porch, still wearing Thomas's old shirt, looking out across fields that stretched to the horizon. The land looked different now, open, free, full of possibility. Thomas stepped beside her, his weathered hand finding hers. Their eyes met, not as rescuer and victim, but as two people who'd survived the darkness and found light on the other side. What's the lesson in their story? That even in the deepest hell, someone can reach down and pull you back. That no matter how broken your past, your future can still hold strength, healing, and love. That saying no to evil, even when it costs everything, is always worth it. So let me ask you something. If you saw someone like Emily, broken but still fighting to survive, would you walk away? Or would you be the one to pull them from the river? Think about it, because in the Wild West and in life itself, we all face that choice. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because out here on the frontier, the battles never end.